Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Impact Factor. I'm your host, Katie Van Aken, and today we have another interview episode for you. Our guest this episode is a very good friend of mine who, luckily, we've been able to stay in touch after both graduating, and we actually play on a co-ed soccer team together to blow off steam from our respective jobs. So, without further ado, here is my good friend, Marty Walsh. Dr. Walsh.
Dr. Martin Philip Theophilac Walsh.
Yeah, yes. And then, so we can, we'll just jump into it.
Lead the way.
Well, lead the way. Okay, so let's start with the easy question. So, Marty, what was your PhD in?
My PhD was in chemical and biological engineering at Drexel University.
Okay. Did you have like a focus, like a research topic focus?
So my focus going in was drug delivery using microbubbles nested inside a liposome. And that kind of tweeted into more of as the years went on, bacteria destruction, more looking at how microbubbles can affect cells and bacteria, and if they could be used for food processing to kill bacteria off of produce.
So kind of like the same science for a different application?
Yeah, it was using all the same techniques. The only difference was these were free-flowing microbubbles versus the drug delivery was more microbubbles nested within a liposome. But they both were using the aspect of ultrasound and microbubbles.
Cool. Did you also major in chemical engineering in undergrad?
Yeah, so I went to Rowan University for my bachelor's in chemical engineering. And then, so I stayed in the same field.
Did you go right into your PhD?
Yeah, so I originally throughout my bachelor's, I was very set with, I'm just going to go straight into industry. I never really thought about going into my PhD.
Mm-hmm.
But as it got to my junior, senior year, I was like, you know what? I want to kind of live abroad. So I was like, all right, let me look at programs to like live in Europe. And I was talking to two of my professors at the time, Dr. Robert Hesketh and Dr. How do I say his name? Silvesky. And Hesketh was always, he told me straight away, he was just like, don't go to Europe until after for a postdoc. He was like, go straight into do a PhD in the States and then do a postdoc over in Europe or something if you do still really want to travel. Dr. Silvesky was a little different. He was like, you know what, just go travel. He was straight for that. He actually was like saying, take a year off, travel, and then come back. Do your sciences and stuff. But I ended up applying to a few master's programs over in Europe. And since the PhD, I was like, all right, you know what, maybe I will want to do it. So I applied to a few places in the States, and I got into a few like the master programs, and one of them was in Norway. I forget what university it was, and then I got into Drexel as well. And after like kind of thinking over and reading and like talking with my advisors, I was like, no, the PhD sounds like the wiser opportunity and more up my alley, because pretty much if I went over to get my master's, I was going to go the same route. It just was going to end up paying for my master's or just paying for living and then going to get my PhD anyway. So it made more sense to do that. So it kind of led me down that way and ended up going to Drexel through that.
And then the rest is history. So when you were at Drexel, did you get a chance to be abroad at all?
I had opportunities to. So I did get to go to a conference with my lab mate. We went to bioinformatics in Zurich, Switzerland.
Oh, cool.
So me and my lab mate got to present there. We both did posters, and he actually was selected to do one of the most of their present or talks were mainly faculty or distinguished professors and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So the only opportunity to kind of do a speech there or a talk was like they had like this competition where a few selected people got to be like a 13 3 or 2 minute blurb, and then the winner of that actually got to give a talk. But other than that, Drexel did have great opportunities, and they were their grad department and writing department were really helpful with this. I didn't take advantage of it because self with my research, I just didn't feel like it was an opportune time.
Yeah.
But my lab mate Mike Cimarelli ended up doing it, and he did a year abroad in Amsterdam.
Cool. Yeah,
Well,
I've heard of other students do that, like just like a fraction of time in a um in a lab, a collaborative lab, or some professor that your professor knows or something like that.
yeah, and he got to do that, and I think he actually won two different awards to do it. But
Mm.
he's a very
Classic Mike.
accomplished man. He always made me feel he always made me feel a little bit worse about myself because of how good his work schedule and how smart he was. But
Yeah,
he was always a great lab mate anyway. But
that's good. I mean, but that's important. Well, to
but
recognize that there are situations where like people have different projects in the same group, and sometimes some go well and some don't, and it can make you feel kind of shitty.
yeah, and it's you just pretty much have to acknowledge what it is and like accept the fact that like yeah, sometimes certain projects go better than others, and sometimes it's your fault, sometimes it's just the person who's on the other project was that so much extra hard work. And
Yeah,
but yeah, I accept as it was, and I got to go visit him while he was there, so that was good. And
nice.
my advisor, Dr. Ren, was very open for all that stuff. He always recommended like to try it and like was very supportive throughout any of it for any opportunities.
That's great. Um, from what I remember from your department, you didn't come in with a research group planned, correct?
So I kind of so yeah, the way our
Yeah,
department
can you talk
does
about how
it.
that works?
So yeah, so during so once you got accepted into our program at Drexel for the chemical and biological, you went to acceptance students day, which a lot of probably universities do, and you pretty much met with all the faculty that you could potentially the lab groups that were open to join, and you pretty much they did presentations where like a poster session with all the lab groups doing their own posters, and then you were able to meet with a certain amount of faculty, and then you had like opportunities to talk to different faculty if you didn't get to meet with them. But when you accept going into Drexel, unless you kind of really talked to a professor and was like very set, which was not too likely because there are some things that could come up and not let you be in that lab.
Hmm.
But the first year while you're at Drexel for my program, you did classes and you pretty much met with professors, and pretty much each professor you would talk to, and you actually had to fill out a form on which professor and lab you wanted. So you would put it, I think mine was three,
Like
or
your
you
top
chose
three.
three, a top three or top five. And you would put into those, and you pretty much would talk to the professor beforehand, being like, hey, you're my number one.
Mhm.
But then the committee, like the department, would sit down with all the professors, and it kind of was like a draft in a sense on, and where you would pretty much get to pick, or they would decide on which lab you got to. So if you were lucky and you put your professor at its number one, and most of the other students put them as number two, you're typically going to that lab group. But if like seven of you guys put your professor as number one, the professor pretty much only was allowed to take a certain amount of students.
Mm-hmm.
So you pretty much didn't find out until January, December, January of your first year at Drexel if what lab group you were going to get into. So I know a lot of students don't like that as much because they like to know what research they're getting into. So it's not like kind of like, oh, I decided to go to the school and now I'm in a lab that I didn't really want to be, or not want to be in, but like wasn't my ideal
Doing
situation.
something that wasn't, yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know. I think there's pros and cons because I think the nice thing about that is you have a chance to talk to the professor and be there and get a sense from even like the current students in the different labs about what kind of environment it is, and that can go into your choice. Um, there are plenty of people who pick a school based on the research group, and they do some research, but you can only gather so much, without living in it, and sometimes it doesn't work out. Just like the relationship with the advisor isn't the best.
Yeah,
So
I
I think
totally
this
agree
helps that.
there.
Yeah.
Plus, the only thing I would recommend is always if you're going to a school like that with how they work like that, make sure you have more than one lab group that you are comfortable with going into or
Mm,
area research because if you put all your cards in a basket,
yeah.
you just have to just be ready for what might happen is the thing.
Yeah. You need to be okay with getting not your first choice
Yeah.
because it could happen. Um,
Yeah, there's actually I've seen many students do that or they actually got into lab groups they didn't really want or it didn't fit well
mm,
even though they weren't their number one choice and a lot of them either left or tried to switch departments or stuff with that.
yeah, I believe that. Um, the other thing too, I was gonna ask you, I forget. So for you guys, you had qualifiers. What was the format of your qualifying exams?
Oh yeah, the qualifiers, they were a thing of a nightmare somewhat. So pretty much
Hope this isn't
in
triggering to think back on it, but
no, it wasn't too bad because I enjoyed it decently because it was kind of a reminiscent of your undergrad.
yeah,
But the
right.
pretty much the qualifier was, I think it was like January. You took this test and it was for I think they switched it for us, but it was for us it was 6 subjects and they were pretty much like a final from each subject. And they were a
Mm,
little short and I think there was only like a few like a front side sheet of the problems, but it was thermodynamics, fluid dynamics, heat transfer, mass transfer. What else was there?
so like
Separations and controls.
the
Like the
big hits
big
of
main,
chemical
eh,
engineering.
pretty much, yeah. It was the
Yeah.
main, your main subjects of chemical engineering, and pretty much you had to pass 4 or 5 of the 6. Maybe there was 7. I think you had to pass 5 of the 7. Yeah, you had to pass 5 of the 7 subjects. So there was actually 7, and it was like a 2 hour,
To
maybe
do all of
five
it.
hours. No, it was 5 hour exam,
Oh my god.
and you pretty much were in there, and you could choose what sections you want. You could technically only do 5 if you wanted to, but
If you
everyone
were
tried
sure
to
you were
do
gonna
as
pass.
well. Yeah,
Y-
because there's
Yeah.
certain subjects that you feel a little comfortable with,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
especially um, coming from Drexel, you or coming from Rowan to Drexel, I realized there was certain subjects that are like taught kind of different.
Yeah.
So there was certain techniques and different things, and like it was very similar, but there was just like um, different things. So you pretty much had to figure out. So it was all a lot of like trying to get undergrads like figure out from the undergrad classes on like how this teacher
Oh,
teaches or stuff, but like
interesting.
you didn't know which teacher was writing it, so it's kind of just like a hit or loose, but it kind of gave you like a roundabout idea, and it was pretty much yeah. So you were pretty much like studying for that in every free time you had, and if
Yeah.
you didn't pass, you pretty much were, I think
Moving on.
given like well, you were given matter on how, like, if you failed, like, I think that you were out. But like, if you were close, like off by like a point or two, they would give you like a makeup or something.
Mm. Yeah, I find that so interesting because I know that there are programs that go about it that way. Sometimes the exams are even, oral instead of written. Um, and for us, we had to become an expert on a topic and give a presentation and then answer questions about it. Um, but yeah, I think it's interesting and it's important to know going in, what that's going to look like. Like if a student doesn't knows that they don't test well, maybe that should go into their decision as far as where they're going to end up. But you
Yeah,
got
and I
you got through
also,
it.
yeah, thankfully. But I also think what you went through is a better indication of how your PhD is going to be, because I feel
True.
like from what I went into, you already knew. I feel like our grades and GPA from our undergrad already showed your
True.
knowledge of that subject. And most of the knowledge of that subject, yeah, it can come into your PhD, matter on which ones, and like certain subjects more than others. But
Right. But
I
that's
felt
not what
like,
you're researching. Like those are
yeah, but
those
I
are
feel like
fundamentals, yeah.
um, doing something like that where you are becoming a master of a topic or information, trying to translate it back to someone, shows a lot more potential of how well you're going to be in a PhD, because your PhD is mainly taking information, finding what add into the information. It's being able to master a subject kind
Yeah.
of and translate it to your project.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And it was definitely nerve-wracking when I was doing it, but I think the it made total sense, especially I feel like in our department because material science was attracted a lot of grad students that did undergrads in different subjects.
Mm.
So we had like I was a physics major, we had chemistry, um, chemical engineering, material science, biomedical engineering. So we all didn't have the same like core um
Background.
background in undergrad. So I think it'd be hard to come up with like, just a handful of test subjects that everybody would know. So then you'd end up with people who are sort of have an advantage over others. And so anyway, yeah, I think it worked really well for us.
Yeah, no, I agree there. Where I think it scared off a few people in different
Hmm.
majors who were very interested in the lab, certain
Yeah.
lab groups that were just like, oh, this qualifier, like I'm not going to pass this type of
Yeah.
situation. Because for us, it's like relearning a subject. For them, it's learning five new subjects.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that also, like, you, especially like someone like you coming from physics into a subject like this, like going to maybe batteries
Yeah.
or microbubbles, you can translate very well.
Hmm.
But like knowing the certain subjects, I don't like, you're going to probably have to learn a few of those dynamics. But
Yeah.
it's more of a, I don't think it's that's the best way to test out people.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to switch gears for a second. What are you up to now?
So now I'm working at Fox Chase Cancer Center, and uh, I'm in epigenetics right now with Dr. Andrews, because I'm doing research where I'm looking at pretty much histone acetylations and looking at the pathway on how histone, um, how they are the acetylation and is can alter how the histones interact with DNA, and pretty much kind of map out how it's all regulated, so that way we can kind of get an ideal pathway of like what your body's like, the typical pathway it happens, so you can kind of better know what is a misregulation
I
aspect
see.
on like what's like developing different areas of like diseases and cancer.
Interesting. So you're working with um doctors. Are they practicing medical doctors?
No, my they're pretty much PhDs as well.
Okay.
Well, at least my professor right now is. Um,
Oh,
but there are many departments in Fox Chase that are working with doctors and
yeah.
aspects.
So, but is your role
Um,
like a postdoc or just like a research associate?
so my position is a postdoc
Postdoc.
associate
Okay.
right now.
Okay.
So, um, yeah, pretty much Fox Chase Cancer Center kind of is like it's a big hub for a lot of postdocs, and
Okay.
now it's connected to Temple,
Okay. That's what I
so
was
it's
gonna
all
ask because
part of
it
Temple.
it sounds like it has a very academia vibe, and yet it's not really a university. But as you said, it has ties to Temple, so I guess there's a lot of overlap there.
Yeah, it's so it used to be its own um, facility, and then Temple bought it. So it kind of now like it kind of works like itself alone. So it's like different type of postdoc than like an academic post. So it's kind of similar, but like you don't have as many like undergrads doing research as much, or like that aspect where it's
Gotcha.
like most of the people there aren't like the professors and stuff um aren't like teaching as
Hmm.
well. They're it's so it's kind of like a little different area of research. I feel like it's like an in between industry and like academic type of situation.
Yeah. Sounds like it.
But it's
Cool.
a very nice facility and great research is going on there.
Yeah. Do you think you'll stay there for a while?
Yeah, my plans to stay there for so this September will be my first year there. So I'll probably stay there for like another year or two, depending on uh, how my research goes and papers.
Hmm.
But after that, I'm planning to go into industry
Okay.
and kind of go into more of the pharmaceutical aspects and drug delivery fields with it, with my area of knowledge.
Well, Philly is a great area for pharmaceutical industry positions, so that's exciting.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see aspects of that, especially with this because it is a little different trend. It was a big transition for me from my research from Drexel to Fox Chase because though so at Drexel when I started looking for research or looking at the labs, uh, their research Dr. Wren was proposing for me was mainly like looking at drug delivery, which like really kind of made me want to go into his lab.
Hmm.
And so like I was very interested in more of going into pharmaceuticals like drug delivery and that aspect. And mainly his was used looking at a new vesicle to deliver drugs that would be um, very targeted. So you would
Hmm.
be able to target the area that you would be able to release the drugs. So that way it wouldn't be just flown through your system, or it would still flow through your system, but um, the main area would be attacked more
Hmm.
and it could be more concentrated into certain areas. But as it went on in my PhD, kind of my research and the funding kind of more collaborated with collaboration with the University of Maryland with Dr. Rohan and UC Davis with Dr. Nitton. And so I kind of developed more into going into that route and looking in more of the bacteria destruction and cell destruction and like the effects of microbubbles with that aspect and kind of quantifying their how the bilayers and membranes can be affected from the microbubble cavitation. So when I was looking for jobs and postdocs, which wasn't the best time because of COVID,
Hmm.
uh, I when I found Dr. Andrews' lab, I was very excited to look into that. And after meeting with him and talking to the people in his lab, I was very interested to learn, and I knew there was going to be a big learning curve, but um, I felt like this was the area and this was the direction that I wanted to go into.
That's great. And now that you're a fully full-time working person, do you feel like there's anything you miss about the grad school life?
Um, I do miss kind of like the Drexel school and like the GSA kind of aspect
Hmm.
because I felt like still being with the school and everything, there was like a lot more camaraderie, at least for me. But it was also like my senior year. It's kind of a little different because that was my 5th year at Drexel.
Right.
So at that point, I was very comfortable with everything.
Yeah.
And this is like still my first year. So like, which at Drexel I was still kind of new,
Yep.
but um,
Let's talk
not too
about that
much
though.
because
So
I feel.
you did some non-research related things at Drexel.
Yeah.
Um,
So the first thing I did was our department's GSA, our Graduate Student Association, which I got talked into through Sedella,
mhm.
but and
I feel
she
like that's always how it happens. I was also talked into mine.
and Katie Dillard both kind
Hmm.
of and Ryan Gordon kind of talked us into like joining, and like our first year, like they had like a lot of the events, and it was kind of more of that's where you actually got to meet most of the other graduate students in your department. So I was already kind of like for it, but like they kind of like were talking me into it, and I was like, I definitely would do this. And like most of the aspect of it was very interesting and up my alley. And I really like the idea of like kind of connecting each other because honestly, you need to network, and a lot of people, if they're there's a lot of labs and other people that you're kind of researching stuff don't like cross. So
Yeah,
like you don't really get to meet them until these types of situations.
outside the lab. Yeah.
Yeah. So did that for 2 years. I think I was vice president and I forget what the other position. I was in charge of like the pretty much the advertising and running the groups and everything, and kind of
Hmm.
more of the social aspect of the networking and reaching out to other groups. So I kind of was kind of like the VP. I was like the in charge of the communications,
Hmm.
and then from that I went and joined Big GSA, which is in charge of all the graduate students at Drexel, which you were also a part of.
Hmm. Yeah, I usually describe it as like graduate student council. You're like the liaison between the grad college and the administration and like the grad students.
Yeah,
It's a big job.
yeah. And when I joined that, I was in charge of the VP of communications, which was a lot more or not overwhelming, but task related because now I've run pretty much the Facebook, the Instagram,
Hmm.
and did all the flyers and pretty much spread the word of all the events or anything that needed to be told to the graduate students.
You had
So,
more things to communicate at that level.
oh yeah, and also trying to hear back from any of the students or anybody. So, like if they had any questions or concerns, to help try to respond to them as well and kind of lead them to different aspects because I would also I have to monitor the messages and responses of anybody from from that network. But
Yeah.
along with that, you're also part of the whole council of. So you pretty much had those meetings weekly, and even though you weren't part of and running the other aspects, you were pretty much you were still helping out and planning things with everybody and
Yeah,
talking
and
to Sandra.
even though it's like time consuming, I feel like it's so valuable just from like a leadership and an organ and if I mean if anyone wanted to be a professor one day and end up in academia, it's great to kind of see behind the curtain, and have that access to administration and decisions that are made, and sort of see how the workings of grad students from the university's perspective.
Oh yeah, and there's so much that goes on that you don't realize that it's just like
Yeah,
time consuming paperwork stuff that's just like
yeah,
just so much more bureaucracy than you think is needed. But
yeah. Well,
yeah,
that's true,
it
like
was
everywhere, right?
oh yeah, and it's good to see behind the window and know how that runs and stuff. And I felt like it was a good addition because you also meet. It's a great networking spot because with that you have people on the board who are way different departments, and I got to see and hear how so much more different like every department's like run because
Mm-hmm.
certain departments like I had a TA my first year and second year. Actually, I think I was done by second year, and I only had a TA 4 classes, but there were other departments. They pretty much were a TA their whole time as well
Yeah,
as doing research, which is a lot more time consuming. And then certain ones are they each like department has different pays, different responsibilities, and everything. And it's something that you kind of I didn't realize like my first 2 years or first 3 years on how different because I was like I thought everyone got paid the same amount almost, but now it's very different and um, you kind of get more of an insight with it when you talk to all the different students.
yeah, yeah. No, it's super interesting. I'm certainly glad that I did that. Um, all right, so going back to your PhD, what was some of the what was like a one of the biggest challenges you faced, or something that surprised you, making that was different than what you expected?
Well, probably the most challenging was when I came in. Uh, my lab so I joined Dr. Ren's lab with me and Mike Cimarelli both joined at the same time, but there was no other students in the
Mm,
lab. So it was like very challenging for us because all we had mainly to learn and run certain equipment and everything was tutorials left by the previous student or
oh,
some
really?
protocols. So
So he
we
wasn't a
had a
new
lot of
professor, it's just that his other students had graduated
right before we came
right
in.
before. Okay, so there was no overlap. Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, because she literally, Nicole Wallace. I think you know Nicole, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she graduated in like the spring or summer before us coming in the fall. So like we didn't really have as much guidance on like pretty much running certain equipment or even like what certain protocols and or things should look like afterwards. So there was a lot of testing and feeling out different equipment and running certain protocols and everything that some went a little bit smoother than others, while others were a little bit harder and might have led to a fire one time,
Well,
electrical fire, which I took care of real well.
of course. Well, I'm sure that you gained a lot of like creative troubleshooting skills just for the reason of not having someone to hold your hand through it. You guys were sort of figuring out as you go, which is a skill that can be used anywhere in life, right?
Oh yeah, it was a
But
very definite. It helped out, like make sure it really tests you on how well you could figure out or even come up with alternative ways to run things
yeah.
or even learn new skills. Like I had to learn how to solder to like
Mm,
circuit boards to
yeah.
fix what got burnt from that electrical fire. So
Nice.
it was different aspects, and in the long run, it definitely helped. I think overall, it might have um, pushed me further back in my research. Like took me longer to get where I should have like kind of started out sooner. But I felt like the skills I got from it were very more applicable to help me out nowadays.
Yeah, that's great. I'm a big fan of recognizing that, um, especially in times when you feel like what you're doing is, futile, recognizing that you're still gaining some skills out of it.
Oh yeah.
Um, all right, well, let's change gears. Do you have a fun memory from your PhD time that you would like to share? Maybe a story or
Oh,
something?
I've had many fun times there, but I feel like my favorites definitely are would be our yearly Thanksgiving football games that we would have every year,
Ah, yes.
which I believe you were part of and came play multiple times.
Yes,
Where
you were infamous for having that as a department, and we were always jealous because you had a fun Thanksgiving event. So
oh
I
yeah,
just forced myself in.
well you knew many of the professors and students anyway.
Yeah.
But pretty much what would happen is our faculty would face off against the students in a football game of like a two-hand touch football game every year. And we had one professor, Dr. Palmese, who was infamous and
Hmm.
the star faculty player, I would say.
Yes.
But we
Very
were,
intense and competitive too.
yeah, but we would always, the students always won. But we would always have a football game every day or every year before like Thanksgiving, and then have a Thanksgiving feast. And we would normally we would get a good turnout of the faculty playing football against each other, and it was always a great time. I would love
Yeah.
to come back
I
if they ever have it again to come back
think it
onto the faculty
Yeah,
because they
right?
would
Because you have a PhD now, so you can be on that team.
yeah, so it's like some years they would invite back faculty to come play for them, or post
Alums.
graduated alumni, and sometimes even collaborators like who were in labs too at Drexel. But they got a few people who would come back. Dr. Stanzione came back the one year. I remember Steve Decker came back another year, and it was something I always looked forward to, and it was just like because also throughout your PhD, you always you see a lot of the professors in like the school manner and the research manners and like
Yeah.
very professional. So you don't really get as much time to just kind of like chat to too many of the other ones. And I always felt like the football game was like kind of something that it was like you got to like kind of really talk to them and hang out with them like personally, not like just talking science, which is always
Yeah.
good too. But it's sometimes nice to take a break and kind of talk to people in different aspects.
Yeah, I was always impressed by how many faculty participated, and I think that is just a testament to the closeness of your department and the fact that people wanted to come to something like that, even if they weren't going to play in the game. Um, but I also think it's so valuable to have those types of events because grad students are in this weird place of like they're not undergrads, they're not children, like they're they're adults and they're professionals, and yet you develop a relationship with your advisor, and then you maybe take classes with other professors in the department. But it's nice to be able to talk to someone like a professor and be like, we're at the same level, like we're colleagues, like also I just tackled you in football, that's fun.
Yeah, I might have had those by accident a few times. They
um
always the professors always try to stay away from me when I was.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that's good. I'm glad you
But
have that memory and you can always think about it when Thanksgiving time comes around.
yeah, I always want to try to get one back up. Maybe I'll see if I can convince the Fox Chase to maybe get a something like that.
There you go. Um,
I'll have to talk to their social committee.
yeah. They're gonna be like, we don't have one. Do you want to be it? Um,
Well, I would be interested to see how many of the professors or uh, PIs would join in.
yeah, yeah. That would be interesting. We'll report back.
I definitely will keep you posted.
Okay. Um, all right, I just have two more questions. One is if you could give yourself in their first year of the PhD some advice, what would it be?
Ooh, probably not to check your phone while you're seeing the new Star Wars. While you're in the previews, because that was a nerve-wracking moment. But uh,
That's actually really before you go on, that's like a really good piece of advice that I learned was when I wake up in the middle of the night to not check my phone because I would then if I had like an email or something that was stressful, I would not sleep the rest of the night, you know? And it's just a
oh
good
yeah,
a good idea to separate yourself, during the movie previews or, at times when there's nothing you can do about what you're about to read.
yeah.
But go on, sorry, I
Well,
didn't mean to interrupt.
no, you're good. And I definitely agree there because once you read something, your mind just changes.
Yeah.
So it's like once you have that information, your thought process just goes down a whole different rabbit hole.
Yep.
But yeah, so that happened to me was we were studying for the qualifiers and I left because me and my bunch of friends were going to go see Star Wars. Like I think it was the Last Jedi, or it was the first one of the new prequels that
Okay.
came out, or no, the new one, the first one of the whatever that came out, and ever I like the previews were starting, so I was like checking my phone and I was like about to turn it off, and I get a text message from one of my friends, and it's like, "Did you get who your professor was? Like who you were going to work in, like lab wise?" And everyone got him except for me and my friend,
Oh
Mike
man.
Sommerelli, because we kind of found, so we didn't mean to do it as like a loophole, but if kind of found a way into the system, or the picking the professor system, because we both wanted the same professor, or we both were adamant about one professor and kind of aspect, but like we pretty much kind of found a loophole. uh, we both applied, like tried to get that professor, or both wanted the same professor, and it ended up working out for us. But we had to have a talk with the head of department beforehand or
Ah.
afterwards. But
So you were
so like
nervous
me and
because you
him,
were like, "Oh, we didn't get it. We didn't get anything." So you were like, "Why didn't I hear anything?"
well, there was many thoughts going through my mind because it was just like, all right, well, everyone else got their professors except for me and my friend, and I didn't know if we were in trouble
Right.
or if I was getting a different professor. What I didn't have any clue what was going to go on,
Yeah.
but my mind just, I'm an overthinker, so I
Yeah.
just had many thoughts flow through my mind. So I was just like, now I'm watching this movie, so I
Yeah.
can't even enjoy the movie. So I'm because I'm thinking so much.
Yeah.
But I don't know. There was a lot of things I would tell myself year one. Mainly, I think mainly don't feel don't be embarrassed of your lack of knowledge sometimes,
Mm.
because I always felt like I never wanted to ask my professor or my advisor certain questions because I always felt like I should know this
Mhm.
type of sometimes, or like, and yeah, there's certain times where you should know this, and but like I did it too much where it's like I was just always too scared or thought I should know this before asking them or have a better understanding. So I kind of like an aspect of, yeah, I felt like I wasn't like informed enough to ask a question in
It
that
sounds a
general
little bit
area. So
like
like,
it sounds a little bit like imposter syndrome too, where you're like, I feel like I should know more than I do, but really you shouldn't know more than you do because you just started, right?
yeah, like pretty much identical to that. Yeah. Where, yeah. So like there was multiple times I should have just sat down and asked my professor certain questions and kind of just like, hey, can you just explain this to me? Like,
Yeah.
because in all honesty, your professor and advisor wants to help you out.
Oh
He
yeah, for
like,
sure.
you guys are both benefiting off of each other. Like you understand things better, gets better research, which helps him and helps you. So like it's all like don't be afraid. Like I would tell myself, don't be afraid to ask questions. Like sit down because yeah, sure. Sometimes like if the professor maybe in his head is thinking, oh, he should really know this, but at the same time, it's like he's still going to help you,
Yeah.
or like they're there for you're there for, to each other. So it's kind of like sometimes I still do it where it's I'm just thinking like I need to try to learn this myself, and
Yeah, I can't
sometimes
ask
that takes
this.
yeah, and so it takes longer sometimes. So like sometimes just asking a question, and if it is a really dumb question or something like that, sometimes you'll just get an answer back like you should know this, go read it up or something like.
Yep.
But like, don't be afraid.
That's good.
Like,
That's
go
really good
ahead.
advice. Yeah, and you're right. A lot of people want to help you, especially professors, and they also love to talk. So, um,
Oh yeah, I've met certain professors that just love to hear themselves speak. So
yeah. So whatever they're gonna talk about, it's fine.
yeah.
Um, all right. So last question. So now that you're, a working professional and you have a more of a life, perhaps, what are some things you do outside of your job? Do you have any hobbies? Interesting
Uh,
things about you?
well, mainly soccer is one of the biggest ones, which I do with you.
Yes, we do play soccer together.
Which is probably soccer is like one of the main things I like love to do, and
Yeah.
I think I'll be trying to play until I can't.
Until your
Like I
body
literally
falls
can't
apart.
play.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
I feel the
Like
same. I feel the
it's
same.
just one of those adrenaline or endorphins that just like no matter if I win or lose, it's just that positive vibe of just going out and playing.
Yeah. And you do
And
like fantasy football, right? And
no, I don't. I
oh,
did that back in Drexel when we did 1 or 2 years where we did a faculty and graduate student fantasy football league,
that's fun.
which was actually a lot of fun. And it was kind of cool to like you would be like talking like not real smack, but like talking
Yeah.
to the professors like each other and like that. But now my friends do, and I'm just not too knowledgeable in football
Yeah.
to warrant some of the friends leagues and stuff like that. But I do some more artistic side stuff for myself, like my Christmas stuff. But
Oh,
that's just
yes.
like
Speaking of which, do you want to plug anything here? Do you want to tell anyone about your Christmas sweater collection?
well, yeah. I don't know if I want my professional going seeing my Christmas aspect, but I guess
Well,
so. If
I'll just
go
tell the
ahead.
listeners that Marty has quite an impressive collection of Christmas sweaters, and that's it.
I think over 30 at the moment, maybe over
Yeah.
40.
So there's
But every year
definitely
there's
an
new ones
aspect
that come out.
of December, a different one every day in December type of vibe.
Yeah. Well, this year was a little different for me because I don't know if I felt comfortable enough
At work.
being the at work to come in because it's like casual wear, but like I don't know if I felt comfortable enough to be known as that person who just has a different Christmas sweater every single day. At Drexel, I felt comfortable, but
Yeah. Well, you're comfortable at work when you do feel comfortable doing that. So that's the goal,
yeah,
right?
that is the goal.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I have plenty, so I would always. So when I worked at Fox, I still do, but last year I pretty much would bring a Christmas sweater with me in my car, and then when I was going home, I would put on my Christmas sweater.
Aw, that's cute.
So I would always technically be still wearing it. But
That's
yeah,
great. I love that.
and if
Have
you
you
do want
ever
to ever, go ahead.
have you ever played have you ever like been Santa for any event?
No, I actually haven't. I do have a
Oh,
Santa outfit,
I think you'd be good at that. I think you could
but
pull it off.
I never really have done it with my nieces or nephews. And then I think any party that I've been to, it's like someone else has been it. But no, I haven't done that yet.
All right,
I
well, stay
definitely,
tuned.
I definitely would. Possibly. I don't know. I feel like I want to grow out a real beard for it if I do.
Oh yeah, that's a fair point. All right, well that's all I wanted to chat with you about. Anything else you wanted to add? Pieces of wisdom?
Oh, I don't know. There's too much stuff to recommend, but I don't know. I can't think of anything right now. But it
That's
was nice
fine.
chatting with you, and
Yeah, well thank you for your time. It was great to talk to someone, in a different department that did some things that were different.
oh yeah, it's always a
Um,
great time chatting with you. And if you ever need me back for anything, I'm a call away, or else just see you playing soccer.
all right, sounds good.
Sounds great.
All right, bye, Marty. Thanks to Marty for coming on the show. If you or someone you know wants to be interviewed on Impact Factor, hit me up on social media. Follow us on Instagram @ImpactFactorPod, and we'll see you next week.